A wedding invitation isn't usually a declaration of war, but when it's printed on $50 a sheet cardstock, sent by the man who legally stole my $10 million house, and invites me to watch him marry the woman he used to take it, it stops being an invitation. It's an insult. And when my sister says, "Go," he'll regret it. I know I'm not going to celebrate. I'm going to collect. My name is Eliza, and I'm 34 years old. Or at least, I was. The woman who received the package wasn't Eliza Vance, financial auditor. She was just a ghost haunting a 400-square-foot box. It wasn't an envelope. Envelopes are for bills, for junk mail, for normal people. This was a box, delivered by a white-gloved courier who looked like he felt sorry for me. It was thick, heavy, and covered in midnight blue velvet. It sat on my IKEA coffee table, looking obscene against the water-stained particle board. My hands were shaking. I knew what it was. Arrogance has a specific weight, and this felt like a brick of it. Inside, nestled on satin, was a single thick plate of acrylic. It wasn't paper. Paper is too common. This was laser-etched, the letters sharp and sterile, floating above the clear depths of the plastic. Julian and Chloe. Their names were intertwined in an elegant script that must have cost a fortune to design. Then, the venue. The address I knew better than my own Social Security number. The $10 million waterfront estate in Medina, Washington. My house. The house I found. The house I designed the remodel for. The house I paid for with every cent of the inheritance my parents left me, plus a decade of my own blood, sweat, and bonuses. I remembered the day I signed the papers, the smell of the salt water from the lake, the feeling of finally having something permanent, something real. Julian, with his visionary promises and his perfectly tailored suits, had been so convincing. He was a visionary real estate developer. "We're a team, Eliza," he'd said, his hand on my back, his voice like warm honey. "Putting my name on the deed is just for tax purposes. It helps us leverage the asset for the business. His business, not ours." The truth came 6 months ago. During the breakup, I didn't see coming. That tax purposes clause was buried under a mountain of legalese, a complex business contribution rider he'd slipped in. A clause that stated the property was an asset of his company, Vanguard Properties. When we split, he didn't just break my heart, he foreclosed on it. He legally pushed me out of my own home with a buyout that barely covered my moving expenses. A fraction of its value, all technically above board. Now, I live in this studio apartment in Ballard. The walls are paper thin. I can hear my neighbor's television, and the hallway always smells faintly of stale beer and old carpets. I eat instant noodles and stare at the peeling paint above my bed. Meanwhile, Julian and Chloe are sleeping in my bedroom, drinking wine on my deck, and living my dream. A raw, acidic rage clawed its way up my throat. I grabbed the acrylic slab, my first instinct to throw it against the wall and watch it shatter. My second was to take it down to the building's rusty barbecue pit and burn it. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers white-knuckling the offensive object. I dialed Serena. My sister picked up on the second ring. She never lets anything go to voicemail. "What's wrong?" she asked. She's a lawyer. She doesn't waste time on hellos. "He sent me an invitation." I spat, the words tasting like poison. A velvet box. "Serena. He's getting married. In my house." I could hear her typing on her end. A few sharp clicks. Then silence. "When?" 3 weeks. He's getting married to Chloe. In my garden. The one I planted. "Good," Serena said. The word was so cold, so unexpected. It cut through my hysteria. "Good. What do you mean?" "Good. I'm going to burn it. I'm going to burn it right now." "Don't you dare burn it, Eliza!" Serena's voice was sharp, the way it got in a deposition. "You're going to RSVP?" "Yes." I was completely baffled. I sank onto the edge of my mattress, the springs groaning in protest. What am I supposed to do there? Go to the wedding for what to cry in the back, to watch them cut a cake in my dining room, There was a pause. I could almost hear her smile. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile she wore when she was about to destroy an opposing counsel. "No, Eliza," she said, her voice dropping to a cool, precise whisper. You're going to look stunning, and you're not going to cry." "Then what? Serena. What's the point?" "You're going to audit. He'll regret it." I clicked the phone shut. The room was silent, save for the hum of the mini-fridge and the distant sound of traffic on the Ship Canal Bridge. Audit. The word echoed in the cramped studio. It wasn't the word of a grieving woman. It was the word of a predator. Serena hadn't said, "get justice," or "make him pay." She used a word that was surgical. She had bypassed the sobbing ex-girlfriend and spoken directly to a person I had buried 6 years ago. Eliza Vance, forensic auditor. I used to be the name whispered in terror in the boardrooms of Fortune 500 companies. I was the woman they called when the numbers looked too good to be true, when the SEC started sniffing around, when a CEO's expense reports suddenly included a private island. I could find a single fraudulent entry hidden in a billion lines of code. I lived for the hunt, the meticulous, painstaking process of untangling a lie. I gave that woman up. I traded her expensive, sterile office in the Columbia Center for a sun-drenched kitchen in Medina. I traded cross-examinations for dinner party menus. I did it to support Julian's dream, to be the partner he needed, to soften my edges. That was the mistake. I had let my sharpest weapon, my own mind, rust. No more. I sat down at the small desk crammed into the corner, the acrylic invitation reflecting the harsh fluorescent light. I opened my laptop. The victim was gone. The investigator was back on the clock. I didn't start with my anger. I started with the invitation. This wedding was opulent, even for Julian, who equated self-worth with spending. This was excessive. The velvet box, the acrylic, the Medina waterfront. This was a multi-million-dollar event. He'd always been flashy, but he was a developer, always leveraged to the hilt. He didn't have this kind of liquid cash. I started pulling public records. The wedding vendors listed on the embossed insert, Bayside Blooms. Lakeview Catering. Celestial Lighting. They sounded established, expensive. I ran the business licenses. My pulse, which had been frantic with rage, slowed to a steady, cold rhythm. Bayside Blooms was registered 3 months ago. Lakeview Catering was registered 10 weeks ago. Celestial Lighting, just 8 weeks. They were brand new. All of them. I dug deeper, pulling the incorporation documents, a small filing fee, a generic name, and a registered agent. That agent's name, a boring LLC, was the same on all 3. Apex Holdings Group. I ran Apex. It was a shell. No website, no history, no assets, aside from being the parent company to 3 brand new, very expensive wedding vendors. Julian wasn't just hiring vendors. He had created them. This wasn't a wedding. It was a transaction. But why to impress people? He already had the house. To hide the cost from whom I needed to know his cash flow, I started with the biggest asset, my house. I pulled the title report from the King County Assessor's database. The breath left my body. It wasn't my house anymore. It was a cash machine. The moment the deed was solely in his name, he had mortgaged it. Not just a new mortgage, but a stack of liens. He had leveraged it to the absolute maximum, pulling out millions in equity. The equity I had put in. My first thought was simple. He's using the house money to pay for the wedding, laundering it through the Apex shell. It was sloppy, but it fit his arrogance. But the loan documents told a different story. I followed the money trail. The UCC filings were clear. The funds from the mortgage, every last dollar, were not designated for personal use or event costs. They were explicitly wired to a different entity, a high-risk, high-reward commercial development project down in Portland, Oregon, a new venture called the Cascade Project. I leaned back, the cheap desk chair creaking in protest. The picture was getting clearer and darker. He'd used the house to fund the Portland deal. That's where all his capital was. So, if the house money was in Portland, where was the money for the wedding coming from? How was he paying Apex Holdings Group? It was a separate pool of cash, a massive one, and it was being funneled through a fake company he'd set up for the sole purpose of throwing a party. Money doesn't just appear. It has to come from somewhere. I stared at the screen, at the two separate lines of inquiry, the Portland project and the Apex wedding, and I knew, with the certainty of a mathematician finding a proof, that they were connected. I had two separate streams of money, and no bridge between them. The house money was in Portland. The wedding money was appearing from thin air and vanishing into the Apex shell companies. I needed to get inside Julian's primary business. I needed to see the books for Vanguard Properties, but he wasn't a public company. His books were private, locked down. I had no subpoena power, no entry point. Or did I? My mind flashed back to a rainy Sunday 2 years ago. We were organizing our digital lives. Julian, ever the delegator, had me set up a shared cloud server. For the house, he'd said. It was for joint bank statements, mortgage documents, insurance, and our personal tax files. When he'd kicked me out, he'd meticulously scrubbed my name from the assets, the bank accounts, the deed. He had his lawyers send me intimidating letters. But Julian was an ideas man. He was a big-picture visionary. He was terrible with details. He was especially terrible with the digital details he'd assigned to me in the first place. I opened a new browser tab. I typed in the old, familiar URL. I plugged in my email, my old password. Access granted. My heart was hammering. His arrogance was breathtaking. He had never even considered that the woman he'd relegated to picking out kitchen tile was the same woman who could financially crucify him. He hadn't revoked my access. I was in. The server was mostly dead. Old house folders, vacation photos. But one folder was still active, still syncing. Tax 2023. It was a logical place for him to be dumping business files to send to his accountant. I clicked it. Inside were the usual, boring subfolders, W-9s, invoices, receipts, and one folder that did not belong. One folder he must have dumped there by mistake, or perhaps in a hurry, intending to move it later. Project Cascade. I clicked. It wasn't a mistake. It was a mirror. The entire general ledger for Vanguard Properties. He hadn't just left the door unlocked. He'd left the safe open on the front lawn. My fingers flew. This was my native language. I wasn't an ex-girlfriend trespassing. I was an auditor at work. I ignored the petty expenses, the payroll, the material costs. I went straight for the big wire transfers. There it was. A vendor. Apex Holdings Group. My vision tunneled. The room, the traffic, the smell of stale beer, it all dissolved. It was just me and the numbers. A wire transfer to Apex Holdings 2 months ago. Another, larger one, 6 weeks ago. A third, just last week. They were coded as consulting fees or event marketing. Plausible, but sloppy. And the amounts. The numbers were staggering. $300,000 for event marketing, which I knew was celestial lighting. $150,000 for consulting fees, which I knew was Bayside Blooms. This was the first twist, the moment the case breaks open. He wasn't just paying them, he was overpaying them. Wildly. I knew the vendors for an event of this scale. A $150,000 floral budget is one thing, but I knew the company was a shell. He wasn't paying for flowers, he was just moving the money. Julian wasn't just paying for a wedding, he was using the wedding as a mechanism to wash cash. This was textbook money laundering. He was creating fake invoices for triple the market rate, paying those invoices to his own shell company, and booking the expense against his business. But the last piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Where was the cash from? I traced the journal entries back. The payments to Apex were coming from Vanguard's primary operating account, and what was feeding that account, I pulled the list of deposits. It was the investor capital for the Cascade project. I saw their names, pension funds, private equity groups, people who had trusted him with their money, millions of dollars, to build a state-of-the-art building in Portland. He was systematically embezzling. He was stealing from his own investors, running their money through the fake wedding vendor laundromat, and using it to fund his absurdly lavish new life. He was robbing Peter to pay himself. And he was inviting me to watch the celebration. I had a beautiful, crystal-clear case of embezzlement and money laundering, and it was completely inadmissible. I had obtained it through illegal access to a private server. If I walked this into the FBI office, I'd be charged right alongside him, and any decent lawyer would get the evidence thrown out. I couldn't go to the police. Not yet. I had to build a case in the real world, a case that didn't rely on a stolen password. Julian had wronged more people than just me. I needed to find them. I needed allies. My first call wasn't a call. It was a drive. I went back into the Cascade Project files, but I wasn't looking at the money. I was looking at the people. There was one name listed as the chief architect, the man whose vision Julian was supposedly funding, Marcus Gallo. I remembered his name from Julian's conversations. Julian had praised his genius, his award-winning designs. Marcus was old school, a man who believed in structural integrity and artistic vision. He was the perfect cover for Julian's grift, and he was the project's greatest liability because he was honest. I found his office address in Portland and his cell number. I sent him a simple text. I have information about the financials on the Cascade project. I'm an auditor. We need to meet. We met at a sterile, anonymous coffee shop in the Pearl District. He was in his 50s, with tired eyes and flower-white hair. He clutched his coffee cup like a life raft. I didn't waste his time. I'm Eliza Vance. I used to be professionally associated with Julian. You're the ex, he said, not unkindly. The one from the house. I am, I said, meeting his gaze, which is why I've been looking into his finances. Marcus, I'm worried about your project's cash flow. I'm seeing what look like massively inflated administrative costs, payments that don't make sense. I watched him. A good auditor watches the body, not the mouth. His jaw tightened. The exhaustion in his eyes turned into a sharp, familiar fear. He pushed me out, Marcus admitted, his voice low. About 4 months ago. No more financial meetings. He said I just needed to focus on the creative and he'd handle the money. He leaned in. The subcontractors. They're not the ones I approved. We specified high tensile steel for the core supports. The supplier he's using, it's not the right grade. I've flagged it, but he buries my reports. He's cutting corners on materials. Eliza. But his personal life, this wedding, is being paid for by your project, I said flatly. His face went pale. He couldn't. He is. He's using substandard materials on your building so he can pay for a champagne fountain at his wedding. I had him. My next call was to a different kind of ally. I drove back to Seattle, my mind clear. I needed to put pressure on him from the outside. I needed a shark, Isabella Ramirez. She was an investigative reporter for the Portland Ledger, a Pulitzer-nominated bulldog I'd worked with tangentially on a corporate fraud case years ago. She hated men like Julian. I used a public library computer and a secure, anonymous email account. The message was short. Just bait in the water. Subject tip for the Ledger, Vanguard Properties. You might want to ask Julian Vance why his Cascade project in Portland is making multi-$100,000 payments to a Seattle-based wedding vendor called Apex Holdings Group. Apex appears to be a shell company registered 2 months ago. Smells like embezzlement. Happy hunting. I hit send and logged out. Isabella wouldn't be able to trace it, but she wouldn't care. The scent of blood was too strong. She would start digging. The board was set. The pieces were moving. I made my final call as I walked back to my apartment. Serena picked up instantly. How was your trip and productive? The architect is terrified, and the press has the scent. It's time. Time for what? A dress fitting, I said. Do you still have that spectacular midnight blue gown, the one you wore to the Bar Association gala? Eliza, that dress is a weapon. Of course I do. What else? The last piece. The one that would make this whole thing work. I need you to find someone. A professional. I need an expert in surveillance equipment. Audio and video, high quality. Serena was silent for a beat. When she spoke, her voice was full of admiration. My God, you're not just going to the party. You're wiring the place. I met Serena at her law firm's high-rise office, the skyline of Seattle gray and sharp behind her. We were 2 weeks out. The case is solid, I said, sliding my laptop across her mahogany desk. Embezzlement from the Portland investors, money laundering through the Apex shell, tax fraud, it's all there. Serena looked at the screen, but not at the data. She looked at me. And how did you get this? Eliza, did you use your old house password on his Vanguard server? I didn't flinch. Yes. Then it's fruit of the poison tree, she said, closing the laptop. Completely inadmissible. You drop this on the DA's desk, and your case gets thrown out. Worse, you get charged with unauthorized access. This was the hurdle. Julian was too slick to keep his confessions on paper. He was a salesman, a speaker. He did his dirt in person, with a handshake and a smile. So, what do we do? I asked. We make the evidence admissible. Serena replied. He won't write it down, but you can make him say it. We don't need the server logs if we have a confession. A live, recorded confession. The plan crystallized. It was simple. It was brutal. We weren't going to the wedding to stop it. We were going to the wedding to document it. The first step was the easiest. I went to the wedding website, the one dripping with professional engagement photos of him and Chloe laughing on my old deck. I clicked RSVP, Eliza Vance, +1. The second step required Serena's network. She took me to a nondescript building in Sodo, to an unmarked office that smelled of solder and ozone. The expert was a man named Mr. K, a compact, quiet man who Serena introduced as a former FBI technical specialist. He specialized in corporate security and depositions. He didn't ask why we needed the equipment. He only asked about the environment. A large house, waterfront, I said. Lots of glass, hardwood floors. There will be music. I need to capture a conversation, clearly, in a crowded room, and maybe in a private one. Mr. K nodded. He returned from a back room, not with a spy pen, but with a jeweler's box. Inside was a heavy, modern silver necklace with a brushed dark stone as the centerpiece. Beside it, a pair of matching, intricate silver earrings. The stone in the necklace is a high-definition, wide-angle camera, he said, his voice a flat monotone. 8K resolution, autofocus, low light compensation. The earrings are paired audio, directional microphones. They will isolate the voice of the person you are facing and filter out 90% of the ambient sound. It's a 6-hour battery. It transmits live to a secure encrypted server. The feed cannot be stopped or deleted from the device. I picked up the necklace. It was heavy, cold, and beautiful, a perfect Trojan horse. The third part was the bait, the wedding gift. Julian was arrogant, but he was also curious, like a magpie. He loved things that glittered. I went to a high-end crystal shop and bought a magnificent, heavy-lidded box that cost more than my first month's rent in Ballard. My initial plan was to fill it. I spent an entire weekend printing out every piece of my inadmissible evidence, the fraudulent invoices from Apex, the wire transfers from the Cascade project, the emails from the shared server showing his intent. I had it all bound in a beautiful, custom leather portfolio, the Vanguard audit. It was a prop, designed to make him panic, to pull him aside, to confront me. But then, something felt wrong. The plan was too simple. It hinged on Julian being the sole operator. But he was lazy. This scheme, the interlocking shells, the precision of the laundering, it was too meticulous for him. Julian was a hammer. This was a scalpel. I had 3 days before the wedding. I stopped focusing on the gift and I started focusing on the bride. Chloe. I had always dismissed her as a beautiful, younger upgrade, a gold digger who had won. But that was my anger talking, not my logic. I ran her name through the same databases I'd used for everything else. The first hit was nothing. Chloe Davis, social media, parties. But I was an auditor. I looked for the name behind the name. I went back to the Apex Holdings Group incorporation documents, the ones Julian's shell company had paid. The registered agent was a generic legal firm, but the signatory, the name on the actual incorporation charter, C. Davis. My blood went cold. It wasn't him. It wasn't Julian. I dug. I cross-referenced. And I found her. Chloe Davis wasn't just a pretty face. She was a Wharton graduate. She had worked for 2 years at a private equity firm specializing in creative asset management. She wasn't a gold digger. She was the mastermind. Julian was the face, the salesman. He was the one schmoozing the Portland investors. But she was the one washing the money. He was stealing it, and she was cleaning it, using their own wedding as the laundromat. Apex Holdings Group wasn't Julian's company. It was hers. I looked at the beautiful leather-bound book on my table. The prop. It was useless. I had been aiming at the puppet. The plan had to change. This wasn't about getting my house back anymore. This was about taking down the queen. The gravel crunched under the tires of Serena's car. It was a sound I had once loved. The sound of coming home. Now. It just sounded like rocks being crushed. Serena, magnificent in her midnight blue gown, looked over at me. The jewelry is live. The server is active. Try not to touch your neck. I stepped out of the car. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of salt water and the expensive, suffocating perfume of the roses blooming in the garden. My garden. I was wearing Serena's dress. It was a deep, impossible crimson, a silk sheath that fell to the floor, in a sea of white, champagne, and blush-toned guests. I was a gash, a wound. I had insisted on it. This was not a celebration. It was a reckoning. We walked up the stone path, the one I had picked out, slate by slate. The hydrangeas were blooming, just as I knew they would be in June. I had planted them. I felt a profound, horrifying sense of dislocation, like walking through a perfect replica of your life, knowing you are the only thing that is no longer real. I was a ghost at my own wedding, except I was the only one who was dead. We passed the grand salon, the room I had designed with the vaulted ceilings and the reclaimed timber beams. I saw my fireplace, my built-in bookshelves, and I saw them. Julian and Chloe stood near the entrance to the main lawn, a perfect, gleaming white couple under a floral arch that must have cost $100,000. They were laughing, accepting congratulations, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. Then Julian saw me. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. I saw the sequence play across his handsome, practiced face, pure, unadulterated shock. It was followed by a flash of annoyance, and then, as I got closer, it settled into a mask of supreme, pitying smugness. He actually thought I was here to make a scene, to cry, to prove how much I had lost. He thought I was here as a victim. Serena and I joined the line, two predators in couture. When we reached the front, Julian took my hand. His skin was warm, his grip proprietary. Even now, "Eliza," he said, his voice dripping with that fake, sonorous compassion he used when he was about to screw someone over. "I'm so surprised you came. This is, well, it's very brave of you." I smiled. I let my eyes trail from his perfectly tied bow tie to the woman beside him, Chloe. She was watching me with a look of bored, triumphant curiosity. I leaned in, past Julian, close enough to smell her perfume. I spoke in a whisper, just loud enough for the earrings to catch, just quiet enough that only she could hear. How could I possibly miss the chance to congratulate the registered owner of Apex Holdings Group? I watched her face. It was not the reaction of a simple gold digger. There was no confusion, no, what is she talking about? Her smile did not slip, but it froze. It became brittle, like a sheet of ice. Her eyes, a moment before warm and bridal, went completely flat and cold. She knew exactly what I had just said. First blood. I pulled back, my smile never wavering, and turned to my sister. Serena, shall we find the gift table? We walked past them. I could feel Julian's confused stare and Chloe's suddenly rigid back. The gift table was piled high with blue boxes from Tiffany, silver from Christofel, envelopes thick with checks. I placed my contribution among them, the magnificent, heavy crystal box. I knew Julian's curiosity. He was a child in that way. He would be unable to resist opening it, especially from me. He would expect a dead rat or a desperate, tear-stained letter. He would have to look, and I would be waiting. The string quartet was playing Vivaldi as I moved through the crowd, a glass of untouched champagne in my hand. The necklace felt heavy against my collarbone, a silent, cold witness. I saw Serena across the lawn, a shark in blue, charming a group of what looked like city council members. I was looking for one person. I found him near the catering tent, looking pale and sick. Marcus Gallo. He was staring at the flawless, multi-tiered wedding cake as if it were an indictment. I drifted toward him, my crimson dress parting the sea of pastels. "Mr. Gallo," I said quietly. He jumped, his eyes wide with panic. I didn't know you'd be here." "I told you I was invited," I murmured, turning to look at the garden. "You look unwell." He leaned in, his voice a desperate, rasping whisper. "It's worse than we thought. Much worse." He was visibly trembling. "I got a call this morning from a friend at the city, the inspectors. They're coming Monday. Not in a month. This Monday." My stomach clenched. "So he'll just pay them off." "He can't," Marcus hissed, his eyes darting around. "His contact, the guy he was bribing in the planning department, he was arrested. This morning, part of some separate sting. The new inspectors are coming in cold, by the book. They're going to see the materials. They're going to see the shoddy support work." The time pressure slammed into me. This was no longer a long con. We had 48 hours before the whole project imploded. "If they find the substandard materials," Marcus whispered, "we'll all be ruined. The project is dead. The investor's money is gone. He's built a death trap." Eliza. It wasn't just about financial fraud anymore. It was about public safety. The necklace recorded his panicked words, the audio of his testimony. "Stay calm, Marcus," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "Just stay visible. Go talk to my sister, the woman in blue." Before I could move, a hand clamped around my upper arm. It wasn't gentle. It was a bruise. "What the hell is this, Eliza?" Julian's voice was a low growl, his public smile gone, his face a mask of cold fury. He didn't wait for an answer. He dragged me, his fingers digging into my arm, off the lawn, through the glass doors, and into the house. He pulled me into the library, my old office, the scent of old books and lemon oil, the room where I had worked, where I had loved him. The door slammed shut, cutting off the music, encasing us in a sudden tomb-like silence. He released me, shoving me slightly. "What game are you playing?" he spat. "Apex Holdings. You think you're clever." I rubbed my arm, the necklace swinging, its dark stone eye pointed directly at his furious face. "No game, Julian," I said, my voice steady. The earrings were filtering out the muffled bass of the party, focusing only on his voice. "Just a gift, a wedding present. Have you opened it yet? I put a lot of thought into it." You're pathetic," he sneered, trying to regain his footing. "You're here to ruin my day because you couldn't stand to see me happy. You're obsessed." "Is that what Chloe thinks?" I asked. The door flew open, crashing against the wall. Chloe stood there, and she was not a bride. She was a CEO whose quarterly report had just gone to hell. Her white dress was a uniform. Her eyes were like ice chips. "What is this?" she demanded, not at me, but at Julian. "You told me you handled her. You told me she was a pathetic, heartbroken mess who was out of money and out of options. I thought she was gone." The twist: she wasn't asking him. She was ordering him. Julian looked flustered, caught between his two victims. "Chloe, baby, it's fine. She's nobody." Chloe let out a laugh that was so cold it could have frozen the room. "She's nobody. She just walked up to me and named my holding company. You idiot." She finally turned her gaze to me. "You're a fool, Julian." "And you," she said, pointing a finger at me. "You are 10 minutes too late." "What are you talking about?" Julian asked, his voice small. "He doesn't even know," Chloe said to me, her voice dripping with contempt. He thinks he is the man." She stalked into the room. "You think you're smart, don't you, Julian? You think you're the visionary behind the Cascade project." She laughed again. "You're a tool, Julian. You're a pretty face and a good salesman. That's it. You're the front man. My father is the one behind Cascade. It's his money, his deal. You are just the employee I hired to be the face." Julian's face, a moment before flushed with anger, had gone a waxy, chalky white. He stared at Chloe, his new wife, as if she were a stranger who had just pulled a gun. What are you talking about?" he stammered. "Your father. I'm the CEO of Vanguard. I brought in the investors." Chloe laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound that didn't match the white dress. "You brought in the investors my father told you to bring in? You're a figurehead, Julian. A charming one. I'll give you that. You were hired to be the face, to take the meetings, and to be the visionary that men like Marcus would trust." She took a step toward him, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial, venomous whisper. "The Cascade project isn't a building, you moron. It's a land grab. My father's plan is to let the project default. He'll buy out the panicked investors, the ones you brought in for pennies on the dollar, after you've already ruined the budget and the timeline." "The budget." Julian was repeating words, his brain unable to keep up. "Yes, the budget," she snapped. "All that embezzled money, the money I've been helping you wash through Apex." She gestured at me, as if I were a co-conspirator. "That wasn't you stealing from my father. That was my father paying you." "Paying? Me?" "Of course," she said, as if explaining to a child. "Paying you for services rendered, for handling the other investors, for pushing out the ones who asked too many questions, for burying Marcus's reports and swapping out the materials. This house, this wedding, this was your bonus, Julian. Your fee for being the smiling, handsome idiot who takes the fall if it all goes wrong." And there it was, the entire grotesque picture. Julian stumbled back, grabbing the edge of my old mahogany desk for support. He looked physically ill. He hadn't been a partner in crime. He had been a tool. He thought he was a king, but he was just a pawn, and he had just been sacrificed. I had been aiming all my fire at the wrong target. Julian was a con artist, a liar, and a thief. He had stolen my house and my heart, but he was small time. He was an amateur playing in a professionals' league. Chloe and her unseen father, they were the sharks. They were the ones systematically dismantling a multi-million-dollar project, ruining dozens of investors, and covering their tracks with a wedding. I had to recalibrate. The plan in my head, the one about Julian, was obsolete. The necklace camera, the audio, it had all just captured something far, far bigger. I watched Julian, who was now just staring at his hands. I looked at Chloe, who was watching him with undisguised contempt. "Well," I said. My voice was calm, cutting through the silence in the library. Chloe and Julian both looked at me, surprised. I had been so quiet they had forgotten I was the one holding the bomb. "In that case," I continued, "my wedding gift needs to be redirected." Chloe's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Your gift, I saw it. It's a crystal box. Don't be pathetic. The box is a distraction. Chloe, just like Julian, I said. I reached into the small, hidden pocket of my crimson dress and pulled out my phone. I held it up, the screen dark. The real gift is digital, and it's already been delivered. I've sent Isabella Ramirez at the Portland Ledger a copy of everything. Julian looked up, his face a mask of new terror, Chloe's composure finally, beautifully, cracked. I sent her the Vanguard ledgers, I said, my voice cold and precise, the voice of the auditor. But I also sent her the emails from the cloud server, the ones Julian never deleted, the ones where he specifically promised his partners he would handle Marcus Gallo, the ones where he brags about a plan to discredit his reputation and bury his reports so they could move forward with the cheaper, non-compliant materials. I believe the SEC calls that conspiracy to commit fraud. I turned my gaze to Chloe, and I just sent her a new file, a live audio feed. The one where you just confessed to running a shell company, planning a hostile land grab, and admitting to paying Julian to defraud his investors and install unsafe materials. I think the city inspectors, the ones arriving on Monday, will be very interested in that. The blood drained from Chloe's face. The word fraud was bad. The word inspectors was worse. But Isabella Ramirez was a death sentence. Her panic was no longer controlled. It was visceral, primal. You're lying, she hissed, but the conviction was gone. You're bluffing. Am I said, a public scandal, an investigation, an arrest at your wedding. I wonder what that will do to your father's leverage in his little land grab. I wonder what his real partners will think. She'll destroy us, Chloe whispered, turning on Julian. This will ruin the deal. My father. Julian wasn't listening to her. He was watching me, his face a horrifying collage of rage, betrayal, and dawning comprehension. He was the fool. He was the bonus. He was the fall guy, and the two women who had engineered his entire life were standing in the same room, with him trapped in the middle. No, he whispered, a strange, quiet sound. Then he roared it. No! He lunged at me, not at my arm this time, but at my throat. His hands closed around my neck, not choking, but holding me, shoving me back against a bookshelf. You will not ruin me, Eliza. I won, you lost. I took your house. I took your life, and you will not take this. The library door slammed open for the third time. Serena stood in the doorway, her phone held high, its camera light a bright red dot. Behind her, his face ashen, was Marcus. Get your hands off my sister, Julian. Serena's voice was not a plea, it was a command. It was the voice she used in court, the one that made witnesses crumble. As if her words were a cue, the music outside a lively string arrangement stopped. Not a fade, but a hard, jarring cut. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by Julian's ragged breathing and the sound of my own heart in my ears. And then, a new sound, faintly, from down the hill, from the main road beyond my gates. A sound that was rising in volume, wailing, unmistakable. Sirens, not one, a chorus of them. Julian's hands dropped from my throat as if I had burned him. What? What is that? He stammered, looking wildly at the window. That's Isabella, I said, rubbing my neck. The earrings had captured his assault. The necklace had filmed it. She's efficient. I told her I was walking in, and I told her you were violent. She didn't wait. She called the Seattle Police Department. She told them about a multi-million-dollar fraud in progress and an assault. He backed away, his eyes darting between me, the door, and Chloe. He was trapped. The full weight of his colossal mistake, of underestimating me, of trusting Chloe, landed on him. He turned on her. His rage, now impotent against me, needed a new target. You. He snarled, his voice a cracked whisper. You did this. You and your father. You set me up. Me. Chloe shrieked, her bridal elegance dissolving into raw panic. You were the one who invited her. You're the idiot who couldn't even keep your own server secure. If I am going down, Julian yelled, jabbing his finger at her, his face inches from hers. You are coming with me. I'll tell them everything about Apex, about the materials, about your father's land grab, everything. He was completely feral. He needed to destroy something. His eyes darted around, and he remembered. The gift. He turned and bolted from the library, shoving past Marcus, who flattened himself against the wall. Julian! Chloe screamed, running after him. Serena and I followed, walking at a brisk, calm pace. We stepped out onto the lawn, which was now filled with silent, staring guests. Julian sprinted across the grass, a man possessed, and launched himself at the gift table. He found the heavy crystal box. He screamed something incoherent, blaming me, blaming Chloe. He tore the lid off and plunged his hands inside, ripping out the silk lining. He was looking for the leather-bound book. He was looking for the evidence he could destroy. He turned the box over and shook it, his breath coming in sobs. It was empty. He stared at the box, then at the lining in his hands, then at me as I walked calmly toward him across the grass. I smiled. It was cold and clean. You thought I'd actually bring the evidence, Julian, I said, my voice carrying in the dead silent air. You thought I would print it out and put it in a box. I stopped a few feet from him. I raised my hand, my fingers brushing the heavy, dark stone of the necklace. That was just a distraction. I tapped the stone. This is the evidence. It's been live streaming every word, every threat, every confession, to a secure server since the moment I stepped out of the car. Your wife's confession, your assault, your threat to her. The blue and red lights of the police cruisers flooded the driveway, painting the white tent, the white dress, and Julian's horrified face in the colors of his own destruction. Checkmate. It was a beautiful, choreographed implosion. The police officers, professional and grim, moved past the stunned guests with practiced efficiency, and right with them, a human whirlwind, was Isabella Ramirez. She had a cameraman in tow, the bright, harsh light of the news camera cutting through the delicate, expensive celestial lighting as the officers fanned out. Serena, Marcus, and I walked calmly out of the library. We were 3 islands of calm in an ocean of panic. Across the lawn, Julian and Chloe were no longer a couple. They were 2 rats trapped in a barrel, screaming at each other, blaming, threatening, exposing. He's the one who handled the investors. Chloe shrieked at the first detective who approached her, her white dress already stained with grass. He faked the reports. I had no idea. She's lying, Julian roared, his face purple. It was her father's plan. Apex was her company. She washed the money. A detective, a woman with a tired, seen-it-all face, approached me, her eyes taking in my crimson dress and the chaos. Ma'am, I understand you're the one who called this in. Not quite, I said. I unclasped the heavy silver necklace and held it out. This is the evidence, and this. I held up my phone, showing a single, secure URL. Is the link to the cloud server where the entire confession is stored. The audio and video are live. You'll find a full admission of money laundering, conspiracy to defraud investors, the plan to use substandard materials in the Portland project, and the link to Chloe's father. The detective looked at the link, then at me. And the assault? And the assault. I agreed. It was over in less than 10 minutes. The guests, horrified, were being corralled as witnesses. But the main event was the walk of shame. The police cuffed Julian first. The sound of the metal ratchet was louder than the fountain. They cuffed Chloe next. She didn't cry or scream. She went perfectly, terrifyingly still, her face a mask of such profound hatred that it was almost impressive. Isabella's camera crew was right there, capturing every single moment. The bride and groom, in their million-dollar finery, being led away in handcuffs from a $10 million house, past all the people they had conned to get there. Julian was walked past me, his arms wrenched behind his back. He stopped, his face contorted. "I will sue you," he spat, his voice cracking. "I will sue you for entrapment for everything you have." I just looked at him. I reached up and out of habit went to adjust the necklace that was no longer there. "No, Julian," I said, my voice quiet. "You won't. You're going to be far too busy trying to negotiate a plea deal. You should probably stop confessing to your crimes in front of a news camera. Good luck with that." He was pulled away. Serena stepped up beside me, linking her arm through mine, the blue of her dress and the red of mine. We must have looked like the sirens on the cars. "I told you," she said, her voice warm with satisfaction. He'd regret it. I looked around the lawn, my garden. I looked at the house, my dream house, which was now a federal crime scene. The beautiful slate pathways, the vaulted ceilings, it was all tainted. It was a monument to his greed and her ambition. It would be tied up in litigation for years, a rotting asset, a symbol of their downfall. "You know, Serena," I said, as we started to walk away from the chaos, toward the gate. "I don't even want the house anymore. It's just dirty." I saw Marcus talking to a detective, pointing at a document. He looked up and saw me. He looked relieved. He looked like a man who had just been pulled back from a ledge. I turned to my sister. "He is," I said. "But he's not the only one." I left Serena and walked over to Marcus. He looked exhausted, but the panic was gone. "He's going to prison. Eliza, they both are," he said. "Yes, they are," I said. "Which means we have a problem." He looked confused. "What problem?" "The project. The investors. They're still going to be ruined, unless we fix it." I looked toward the lake, but I was seeing Portland. "We have a building to save, Marcus, and now, we have a story to tell the inspectors. Thank you so much for listening to my story." I'm so curious. Where are you listening from? Let me know in the comments and share your thoughts. Please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it a boost by hitting the hype button so more people can hear this story.